Natalie thought she and her brother were working on a business together. Then she found out he had launched it without her and told investors she had backed out. The words hit Natalie like a punch to the stomach. She stared at her phone, the screen lighting up with the message from William, one of the key investors they had been working with. Excited for the launch today. Rob told me you decided to step back, but I still wanted to congratulate you. This is huge. Her breath caught in her throat. Step back. She had never stepped back. She was supposed to be in that meeting. She was supposed to be there when they launched. But somehow Rob had gone ahead without her. Natalie fumbled with her laptop, her hands shaking as she opened their business website. And there it was, the company she had spent years building, the brand she had designed, the pitch deck she had worked on late into the nights while Rob handled the investors. All of it live. And the worst part, her name was nowhere to be found. She grabbed her keys and was out the door in seconds. Rob's office wasn't far. She had been there 100 times before. Their office, as she had thought of it, the place they had worked out of for months, preparing for this moment. Natalie stormed through the doors, ignoring the receptionist's surprised greeting. She didn't stop walking until she burst into the conference room. And there he was, Rob, standing in front of a room full of investors, smiling, laughing, talking like he had built this company from the ground up, like she hadn't been there for every single moment. He saw her immediately. His smile faltered for just a split second. Then he recovered. "Ah," he said, spreading his arms. "There she is, my sister. Everyone, this is Natalie." Every head in the room turned toward her. She barely registered the polite nods from the investors. Her heart was hammering in her chest, her vision tunneling in on Rob. Her brother, the person she had trusted more than anyone. Natalie took a step forward, her voice dangerously steady. "What the hell is this?" Rob had the audacity to laugh, waving it off. "Nat, let's talk outside." "No," her voice cut through the room. "We're talking now. In front of everyone." A few investors exchanged looks. "Good. Let them see. Let them see the truth." William, the investor who had unknowingly tipped her off, cleared his throat. "Is there a problem?" "Yeah, William, there is," Natalie said, turning to him. "Because I didn't step back from this company." She shot Rob a glare. "That was a lie." Murmurs spread through the room. Natalie took another step forward, her fists clenched. "I spent years building this. I came up with the concept. I secured half these meetings. And now he's standing here, acting like he did this alone." Rob's expression darkened. "Nat, let's not make a scene." "A scene?" She let out a sharp laugh. "You stole my business, and you're worried about a scene." The tension in the room thickened. William leaned back in his chair, looking between them. "Rob, what's she talking about?" Rob hated being put on the spot. Natalie saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers twitched at his side. But then he recovered. He plastered on a casual smile and turned back to the investors. "Listen, this is all just a miscommunication. My sister and I," he shot her a look. "We had some differences in direction, and she decided this wasn't the right fit for her." Natalie clenched her teeth. He was so good at lying, so good at twisting things just enough to sound reasonable. She turned to the investors, her voice cutting through the room. "That's not true. I never backed out. I was supposed to be in these meetings. I was supposed to be here today." William frowned. "Rob, she's saying she was still involved." Rob let out a fake, exasperated sigh. "Look," he said as if he were the reasonable one, "this is exactly why we didn't move forward together. Natalie is passionate, but she's emotional about this. I had to make some tough business decisions." Her blood boiled. "You mean you had to cut me out so you could take all the credit?" He spread his hands, feigning innocence. "I made the best decision for the company. You weren't ready for this, Nat. That was the final straw." Natalie took a slow, deep breath, then looked around the room. "William," she said, clear and strong, "you know how hard I worked on this business, don't you?" He nodded cautiously. "Yeah, you were the one who set up our first meetings." She turned to another investor. "And you? Didn't I personally write up the proposal we sent you?" Another nod. Slowly, She watched realization dawn on their faces. The cracks in Rob's carefully crafted lie were starting to show. But she wasn't done yet. She faced him again, her voice cold. You stole from me. My ideas, my business, my future. And if you think I'm just going to walk away quietly, she took a step closer, looking him dead in the eye. Then you really don't know me at all. Silence. For the first time, Rob didn't have a comeback. He could lie all he wanted. But now people were watching, and she wasn't going anywhere. She should have seen it coming. Looking back, all the signs were there. But Natalie ignored them because she wanted to believe in her brother. She wanted to believe that, for once, they were equals. That this wasn't just another one of those times when Rob took something from her, assumed it was his by default, and left her scrambling to pick up the pieces. Maybe that was her mistake, not realizing they had always been playing two different games. She had been trying to build something real while Rob had been waiting for the right moment to take it. She could still hear his voice from months ago, when she first brought up the idea of starting this business together. Are you sure about this? He had asked, leaning back in his chair with that familiar lazy smirk, the one that always made her feel like he was humoring her. I mean, do you really think you can handle running a whole company? She had forced a smile, even though something about his tone had irritated her. Yes, Rob. I've been working on this for years. I just think we'd make a good team. You're great at pitching, and I'm better at operations. We balance each other out. He had pretended to think about it, but she knew then what she knew now. He never had any intention of being her partner. He had just been waiting to see if it was worth taking. Natalie had been the one who put in the early work, who mapped out the business plan, who spent years saving money so they could launch without relying entirely on outside investors. She had been the one reading legal guides, drafting partnership agreements, learning the boring but essential parts of running a company. Rob was good at talking, at making people believe in him, at getting people excited without actually doing the hard work, which was why she had thought they would make a good team. Natalie knew her own weaknesses. She hated public speaking. She didn't have Rob's confidence when it came to negotiating, but she knew this business inside and out. She had built it from the ground up, and she had been willing to share that with him. She just hadn't realized Rob never saw her as a partner. To him, she was a stepping stone. The first red flag had been small, barely noticeable at the time. She had been working late one night, perfecting their pitch deck, when Rob walked in, glancing over her shoulder. You should let me present this, he said casually. Natalie frowned but shrugged. That's fine. You're better at speaking than I am. Exactly, he said, clapping her on the shoulder. You do the numbers, I'll do the talking. That's how we work best, right? At the time it felt harmless. It made sense. She was better at the numbers. Rob was better at talking. But she should have paid closer attention, because every time they met with investors after that, Rob was the one leading the conversation. She wasn't just in the background. She was barely acknowledged at all. At first, she told herself she was just being paranoid. He always introduced her, always called her his brilliant sister who was handling all the behind-the-scenes work. But slowly, the introductions became shorter. His explanations became more vague. And before she knew it, she was being left out of key meetings entirely. She pushed back once, just a few weeks before the launch. Rob, I need to be in those investor meetings, she said, crossing her arms as she watched him type away at his laptop. I've been working on this just as much as you have. He didn't even look up. I know, but investors don't want to deal with both of us. They like things clean and simple. One face for the company, you know. Natalie gritted her teeth. I don't want to be cleaned out of my own company. Rob finally glanced up, his expression carefully neutral. Nat, come on. Don't make this about ego. You're good at what you do, but I'm the one who can sell it. That's just how business works. She felt something uneasy twist in her stomach, but he said it so casually, so confidently, that she convinced herself she was overthinking it. Because why would Rob betray her? She ignored the other red flags, too. The contracts that never got finalized. The way he kept pushing off legal paperwork, saying it wasn't urgent. The way he always insisted on handling investor calls alone. It wasn't until she stood in that conference room, staring at her business with her name erased from it, that she realized the truth. He had been planning this for months. He had been waiting for the right moment to cut her out. And now, standing in front of those investors, he had done it. He had stolen her work. And worst of all, no one seemed surprised. William and the other investors looked uncomfortable, but none of them looked shocked. Why would they? Rob had told them his version first. He had been planting the idea for weeks, maybe even longer, that Natalie was hesitant, that she was nervous about leading a company, that she had backed out. And now she realized the truth. He had been erasing her long before the launch. Natalie took a deep breath, forcing her hands to stop shaking. Rob thought she was just going to walk away, let him have everything she had built. He was in for a rude awakening. She had spent years working for this. She wasn't about to let him steal it without a fight. She walked out of that conference room with her head held high. But the moment she stepped outside, the weight of everything hit her all at once. She had just exposed her brother in front of his investors. She had put everything out in the open, but had it made a difference? She tried to steady herself, but her thoughts were racing. Rob had been preparing for this for months. He had built his story carefully, little by little, so that when this moment came, he could dismiss her as emotional, difficult, unprofessional. And the worst part, some of them believed him. She could see it in their faces, hesitation, doubt. Was she telling the truth? Or was she just a bitter sibling who couldn't handle being pushed out of a business deal? The thought made Natalie feel sick. She had been the one to build this company, the one to research, to plan, to put in the real work. And now, because Rob got to the investors first, she was the one who had to fight to prove she even belonged there. She wasn't going to let that happen. Natalie took out her phone and started making calls. The first was to William. He was the only investor she trusted, even a little. After all, he had been the one to tip her off in the first place, even if he didn't realize it. He picked up after 2 rings. "Natalie," he said, cautious. "I need to meet with you," she said, skipping the small talk. "Alone." There was a pause. "I don't know if that's a good idea. This is already messy enough." She clenched her jaw. "Then you need to hear the truth, the real truth, because if you back Rob, you're backing a fraud." Another pause. Then a sigh. "All right, I'll give you 10 minutes. That was all she needed. Natalie met him at a coffee shop an hour later. He looked as uncomfortable as she felt, but she wasn't there to beg. She was there to set the record straight. She opened her laptop and pulled up every document she had: notes, meeting minutes, drafts of their pitch deck with her edits, emails with investors that she had initiated. She didn't just tell him the story. She showed him. And for the first time since the nightmare started, she saw doubt flicker across his face. Not doubt in her, but in Rob. "This doesn't look like someone who stepped back," he admitted, scrolling through the trail of work she had done. "That's because I didn't," Natalie said firmly. "Rob took everything and pretended I didn't exist." William leaned back, rubbing a hand over his chin. "I won't lie to you, Natalie. This is a mess. Investors don't like mess. I know. And Rob is very persuasive." He hesitated, then looked at her carefully. "What do you want, Natalie?" She took a slow breath. "I want my name back. I want my company back." He studied her for a long moment, then finally nodded. "I'll see what I can do." It wasn't a promise, but it was something. And in that moment, Natalie knew one thing for sure. Rob wasn't going to get away with this. Not this time. The next few days were chaos. She started reaching out to everyone: investors, business contacts, early supporters. She didn't badmouth Rob. She didn't make it personal. She just showed them the truth. Little by little, the cracks in his story started to show. And then something unexpected happened. A journalist reached out. They had caught wind of the story, probably from an investor who didn't want to get caught in a scandal and wanted her side. At first she hesitated. She didn't want a public fight. But then she thought about Rob in that conference room, smiling like he had won. And she realized she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every person who had ever been pushed out of their own success. So Natalie agreed to the interview. The article came out 2 days later. Siblings turned business partners or business rivals. The story behind a startup feud. It wasn't biased toward her, but it wasn't biased toward Rob either. It laid out everything. How they had started the company together, how she had been deeply involved from the beginning, how Rob had strategically removed her from meetings and launched under his name alone, and, most importantly, how the legal side wasn't as secure as Rob had made it seem. That part hit him where it hurt, because if there was one thing investors hated more than bad press, it was uncertainty. Suddenly Rob's company wasn't looking as solid as he claimed. Natalie wasn't prepared for what happened next. Rob called her. For the first time since she confronted him in the conference room, he actually picked up the phone. "Nat," he said, his voice tight. "We need to talk." She let him fill the silence. "This is getting out of control. The investors are panicking. We need to come to an agreement." She let out a slow breath. "An agreement? You can still be part of this," he said, quick and eager, trying to sell her. "We can fix this. You just need to stop." She laughed, actually laughed. "Stop? Stop what, Rob? Telling the truth." He exhaled sharply. "You know this isn't just about the truth. It's about perception. You're making this worse for both of us." "No, Rob," she said. "You made this worse when you stole my company." It wasn't an apology when he muttered, "I should have handled things differently." Not really. But it was the closest thing she was ever going to get from him. And it didn't change anything. She wasn't going to let it go. Rob had made one fatal mistake. But now she had the truth on her side, and she was going to make sure everyone saw it. Rob had underestimated her. He thought he could talk his way out, charm his way back into control, convince her that fighting would only make things worse. But he had already taken everything. What did she have left to lose? The problem was, Natalie had built this business for the long run, brick by brick, carefully laying the foundation. Rob had rushed to launch, eager for attention, eager to prove himself before he was ready. Now that the truth was out, cracks were forming fast, and the whole thing was on the verge of collapse. She wasn't going to let him take her down with him. The morning after his call, she got an email from one of the major investors. William had been pulling strings behind the scenes, and now others were starting to doubt Rob's version. The email was short and professional, but the message was clear: we need to talk. Natalie didn't hesitate. She arrived at the investor's office an hour later, heart pounding. She didn't know what to expect. Maybe they wanted to smooth things over. Maybe they planned to convince her to back down. But when she walked in, she saw Rob sitting there too, arms crossed, looking like he had just been put through the ringer. That gave her hope. The lead investor, a man named Daniel, gestured for her to sit. He didn't waste time. "Natalie, we've gone through your documents," he said, tapping his fingers on the desk. "It's clear you had a significant role in this company's creation." She didn't relax. "Not yet. Rob tells us there was a miscommunication," Daniel continued, glancing at him. "That you two had disagreements on the direction of the company, and he moved forward when you decided to step back." Rob nodded quickly, seizing the moment. "That's exactly it. I should have handled it better. I should have communicated more, but I wasn't trying to cut Natalie out." Natalie held back a scoff. He was still trying to control the story, still acting like this had been an unfortunate misunderstanding instead of outright theft. She met Daniel's gaze. "That's a lie." Rob stiffened. "Come on, Nat. Let's be clear," she told the investors. "Rob didn't just move forward without me. He actively changed contracts, removed my name from documents, and made sure I was locked out of major decisions." She opened her bag and pulled out proof, emails, messages, records of the moments Rob had deliberately sidelined her. She laid them out on the table. For the first time since this started, Rob looked nervous. Daniel flipped through the documents, brow furrowing. The room was silent except for paper shifting. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. "This is a serious issue," he said finally. "The last thing we want is a legal battle that could damage the company's reputation before it even gets off the ground." Rob leaned forward. "Exactly, which is why." Daniel cut him off with a raised hand. "Which is why we need to fix this immediately." Rob looked momentarily relieved, like he thought the investors were about to side with him. Then Daniel turned to Natalie. What do you want? Rob's head snapped toward her. The tension shifted. She had the power now. She let the silence hang, watching the way Rob fidgeted, the way he clenched his jaw as he realized he had finally lost control. I want my share of the company back, Natalie said. Full rights, full ownership of my role. And I want Rob to make a public statement acknowledging that I was a co-founder, not just some assistant who walked away. Rob paled. Nat, you can't be serious. She turned to him sharply. You didn't think I was serious when you stole my business either, did you? Daniel leaned back, considering. That's fair. Rob let out a frustrated breath. You're going to ruin this company over a technicality. You already did, she said. Silence. Daniel exchanged a glance with the other investors, then nodded. We can work with that. But Rob, he fixed him with a sharp look. This situation can't happen again. We invest in people we trust, and right now your credibility isn't looking great. That landed like a punch. Rob flinched. For him, it wasn't just about money or the business. It was about his image. And now his reputation was cracking. The meeting ended shortly after. When she walked out, Rob followed her into the hallway, his face tight with barely concealed frustration. You couldn't just let this go, could you? He hissed. She turned to him slowly, tilting her head. Would you have let it go if I had done this to you? He didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. Natalie let out a slow breath, staring at him. This was the brother she had spent years defending. The brother she had trusted even when she shouldn't have. But this time, she wasn't going to let him rewrite the ending. You should be grateful, she said finally. If I had really wanted to ruin you, I would have. Rob swallowed hard. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. Natalie turned and walked away, feeling lighter than she had in months. She wasn't just reclaiming her business. She was reclaiming. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your thoughts. See you in the next video.